A woman like Ruth, a foreigner, a widow, and a stranger to the God of Israel. After tragedy took everything from her, she stood at a crossroads. With nothing but courage and faith, Ruth made a choice that would change her story forever.
In the days when the judges ruled Israel, a darkness fell upon the land. Famine gripped the hills of Bethlehem, a name that means house of bread, yet there was no bread to be found. The fields lay cracked and barren. The grain jars stood empty. A man named Elimelech looked upon his family, his wife Naomi and their 2 sons, and saw death approaching in their hungry eyes. So he made a desperate choice to leave the promised land and seek refuge in Moab, the land of Israel's ancient enemies.
And so they walked away from everything they knew. With each step, Bethlehem grew smaller behind them. The sun set blood red over the Judean hills as they crossed into foreign land, refugees fleeing famine, trading the promises of God for the uncertainty of survival. They didn't know they were walking toward both death and redemption. Years passed in Moab. The sons grew to manhood in this foreign land, and there was food here, provision that Bethlehem could not give. Then grief struck like lightning. Elimelech died, leaving Naomi a widow in a foreign land. Her sons became her only hope, her only future. In Moab, there lived a young woman named Ruth. She was a daughter of that land, with no knowledge of Israel's God, no claim to his promises. She caught the eye of Mahlon, Naomi's eldest son, and in time became his wife. And there was Orpah, kind and gentle, who married Kilian, the younger son. 2 Moabite women, 2 Hebrew men. The wedding celebration filled the night with music and dancing. After years of loss, Naomi dared to hope again. 2 daughters-in-law, 2 sons, the promise of grandchildren. Perhaps the bitter years were finally behind her. 2 Moabite women, 2 Hebrew men, a blending of worlds, a hope for new beginnings. For a time, there was laughter in Naomi's house again. For a time, life seemed to promise a future. And so Ruth learned. In the quiet evenings by lamplight, Naomi taught her about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so different from the gods of Moab. Ruth listened with a hunger that went beyond curiosity. Seeds were being planted in her heart, seeds that would one day bear fruit beyond all imagining. Nearly 10 years they lived together in peace. These were the golden years, simple, ordinary, and precious. The kind of days you never truly value until they are gone. In time, those quiet moments would shine in memory like treasured gold. Because darkness was coming, and when it arrived, everything would change. Then death came again, swift, merciless, complete. Both sons fell sick and died, leaving 3 widows standing at 2 fresh graves under a storming sky. She had left Judah with a husband and 2 sons. Now she stood with nothing. 3 widows together were 3 times helpless. They sat in the gathering darkness, each facing the abyss. Then word reached Moab. The famine had ended in Judah. The Lord had visited his people and given them bread. And Naomi, hearing this, made her decision. She would return to Bethlehem, return to die among her own people in the land of her birth. She had nothing left but the dignity of going home. She gathered her few possessions and prepared to leave, and her daughters-in-law insisted they would go with her. They set out together, 3 widows on the dusty road. Naomi leaned on her daughters-in-law as they walked toward the setting sun. Behind them, Moab, the only home Ruth and Orpah had ever known. Ahead, Judah, a foreign land, a people who might despise them, an uncertain future. The journey was long, the way difficult, and ahead lay a crossroads where the most important decision would be made. Naomi stopped. The wind whipped around them as she turned to face her daughters-in-law. And there, with tears streaming down her face, she spoke the hardest words. "Turn back. Go home to your mother's houses. You've shown me kindness, but I have nothing to offer you. No more sons to give you as husbands. No future, only bitterness and death. Go back while you still can. Find new husbands, new lives. Don't tie yourselves to my fate." And Orpah, weeping, made the reasonable choice. She kissed Naomi goodbye, embraced Ruth one last time, and turned back toward Moab. There was no shame in it. She had shown loyalty and love. She returned to her people. But Ruth would not be moved. When Naomi urged her to follow Orpah, Ruth's hands gripped her mother-in-law's arm with desperate strength. Her fingers wouldn't let go. Her feet wouldn't take a single step backward. The wind howled around them as Ruth held on, and Naomi saw in her eyes that this was no passing emotion. This was covenant. And then Ruth spoke the words that would echo through all generations. "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." So they went on together, 2 widows on a difficult road. Ruth supported Naomi's failing strength. They entered through the town gate, 2 dusty, exhausted figures in travel-worn clothes, and the town stopped. The stairs felt like judgment. Ruth held her head high despite them, her hand supporting Naomi's elbow. The townswomen gathered around, their voices rising in shocked recognition. Can this be Naomi? They couldn't reconcile the prosperous woman they remembered with this gaunt, grief-worn widow before them. She's so changed. Where are her husband and sons? The questions cut like knives, each one a reminder of loss. Naomi stood in the center of their circle. Then Naomi spoke, and her words were sharp with pain. "Don't call me Naomi, pleasant. Call me Mara, bitter. For the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty." Ruth stood right beside her, but Naomi couldn't see the provision God had already given. In her pain, she saw only loss. She had forgotten that the God who tests is also the God who redeems.
Ruth stood at the window, looking out at the fields golden with harvest. Her mind was working, planning. She had vowed to care for Naomi, and she would find a way, in her homeland. At dawn, Ruth knelt before Naomi and spoke with careful respect. "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor. The lowest work, the hardest labor, but honest." Naomi, too tired to argue, nodded her consent. "Go ahead, my daughter."
Ruth walked to the harvest fields as the sun rose, painting everything gold. It was the beginning of barley harvest, and the fields were full of workers. Strong men with scythes cutting the grain, women binding it into sheaves, overseers watching. And behind them all, the gleaners, the poor, the desperate, the forgotten, picking up whatever fell. She had no way of knowing that she had just stepped onto the stage of her greatest story. God was watching, and so was someone else. And Ruth worked. She bent and gathered, hour after hour under the blazing sun. Sweat soaked her clothes, her back screamed with pain, her hands bled, the sun burned her face, but she didn't stop. While other gleaners paused to rest, Ruth continued. She had made a vow to care for Naomi, and she would keep it, no matter the cost.
Then at mid-morning, the owner of the field arrived. Boaz was a man of standing in Bethlehem, wealthy, respected, a kinsman of Naomi's late husband. But he was also a man of God, and it showed in how he treated his workers. "The Lord be with you," he called to his harvesters, and they responded with genuine warmth. "The Lord bless you."
And then his eyes fell on someone he had never seen before, a woman working harder than all the others, a woman whose face he didn't recognize. Boaz paused, watching her. Something about her caught his attention, not just her beauty, though she was beautiful, even covered in dust and sweat. It was the way she worked, the relentless determination, the dignity in humble labor. His eyes narrowed with interest and approval. Who was this woman? His foreman would know. He had questions.
His foreman said, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." Boaz walked across the field toward Ruth. She was bent over, gathering grain, unaware of his approach. Then his shadow fell across her, and she looked up, startled, to see the owner of the field himself standing before her. Fear flashed in her eyes. Had she done something wrong? Was she about to be sent away? She straightened, dust-covered and exhausted, before this wealthy, powerful man. She fell to the ground before him in the deepest bow of respect, face nearly touching the dust, arms extended, complete humility before authority. Then Boaz spoke, and his words were like water to a parched soul. "Don't go and glean in another field. Stay here with my women workers. Whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." Ruth's eyes widened in disbelief. This was far more than she had hoped for. Not just permission to glean, but provision, inclusion. Boaz's provision extended to every detail. Ruth walked to the water jars, fresh, cool water that belonged to the field workers, and drank deeply. The water was life itself after hours in the burning sun. At mealtime, Boaz called to Ruth, "Come over here, have some bread and dip it in the wine vinegar." He made space for her among his workers and, in front of everyone, gave her a generous portion of roasted grain, more than enough for her and Naomi. Ruth sat among them, overwhelmed. In a single morning, she had gone from a foreign gleaner to an honored guest. The workers watched and understood that Boaz was showing her great kindness, publicly placing her under his protection. As Ruth ate, she realized something extraordinary was happening. God was providing for her, not barely, but abundantly, through the hands of Boaz.
But Boaz wasn't finished. After Ruth returned to gleaning, he quietly gathered his workers and gave them unusual instructions. Let her gather among the sheaves themselves, and pull out some stalks from the bundles, and leave them for her to pick up. Don't rebuke her. It was a conspiracy of kindness. Ruth would return home with more than any gleaner could reasonably expect. The workers smiled, understanding, approving. At the end of the day, Ruth threshed the barley she had gathered. She beat the stalks with a stick, separating grain from chaff, and watched with growing astonishment as the pile grew larger and larger. An ephah of barley, about 30 pounds, a week's worth of grain or more. It was impossible. No gleaner gathered this much. No one could work this well. She looked at the massive pile, then at her dusty, exhausted hands, and tears began to fall. This was blessing. Ruth hoisted the massive bundle onto her strong shoulders and walked through Bethlehem's streets toward home. It was heavy,
30 pounds of grain. She carried it with joy. People stopped and stared. Ruth returned with an impossible abundance. Whispers followed her through the narrow streets. How much is that? Where did she glean? Look at that Moabite woman. But Ruth kept walking, her tired feet moving steadily toward home, toward Naomi, toward the moment when despair would meet hope and bitterness would begin to crack.
Naomi sat in the darkness of their small room, waiting with little hope. Then Ruth entered, and a heavy bundle thudded to the ground. Naomi turned in shock as Ruth untied the cloth and grain poured out, piling on the floor. "Where did you glean today?" Naomi asked in amazement. "Blessed be the man who took notice of you." Ruth replied, "The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz." Naomi's face changed instantly. She knew that name, Boaz, a relative of her late husband, a man of honor. In that moment she understood this was no accident. God had led Ruth to the field of a kinsman who could redeem them.
Oh, Ruth kept working in Boaz's fields through the entire barley harvest and into the wheat harvest, 7 weeks in all, day after day.
Boaz found himself drawn to the fields more often than necessary. He would stand at the edge, watching Ruth work. One evening, Naomi took Ruth's hand and spoke with an urgency born of hope and strategy. "My daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. Tonight, Boaz will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do." It was a bold plan, audacious even. Sometimes you have to step into the story God is writing, even when you can't see how it will end.
Ruth prepared herself with great care. She washed away the dust of the fields. She anointed her skin with precious oil, saved for special occasions. She put on her finest dress, the one she had worn on her wedding day to Mullen, carefully preserved. She arranged her hair beautifully, not to seduce, but to honor, to present herself with dignity before the man who might become her redeemer. The threshing floor was a hilltop clearing where the harvest was completed. Under the stars, Boaz and his men worked by torchlight, tossing grain into the night air. The steady evening wind blew away the chaff, and the heavier kernels fell back to the ground, winnowing, the final step of harvest. It was hard work, but there was joy in it, laughter and celebration. The harvest had been good. God had provided. She saw Boaz among those men, working, laughing, leading. She saw his character, his righteousness, his kindness, and she knew that what she was about to do was right, even if it terrified her.
Eventually, the fire burned low, and the men settled down to sleep, guarding the grain from thieves through the night. Boaz found his customary spot at the edge of the grain pile and lay down, wrapping his robe around him against the cool night air. He fell asleep quickly. He had no idea that across the threshing floor, a woman was gathering every ounce of courage she possessed. Ruth watched and waited, her heart pounding like thunder. This was the moment. Everything depended on what happened next. She rose from the shadows and began to walk forward on silent feet toward sleeping Boaz, toward her future.
With trembling hands, she carefully lifted the edge of his robe from his feet. The cool night air touched his skin. Then she lay down at his feet, not beside him, but at his feet, in the position of a servant making a request of a master. It was the cultural gesture of a woman proposing marriage to her kinsman redeemer, asking him to spread his covering over her, to take her under his protection as a wife. Now she could only wait, barely breathing, as the minutes stretched into eternity. Finally, the cold air on his feet would wake him, and then her fate would be decided.
Boaz stirred.
He woke fully and sat up abruptly, confused and disoriented in the darkness. His hand reached down towards his feet, and he froze. Someone was there, at his feet, in the middle of the night. His voice was sharp with surprise. "Who are you?" His eyes strained in the darkness, trying to see. And Ruth, her voice barely more than a whisper, prepared to speak the words that would either save her or destroy her. Ruth gathered every ounce of courage and spoke into the darkness. "I am your servant, Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me. Spread your garment over me. Take me as your wife. Cover me with your protection. Redeem me and Naomi." It was bold, vulnerable, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. She had laid her heart bare in the darkness, trusting in Boaz's righteousness, trusting in God's faithfulness. Now she waited, barely breathing, for his response. Would he be honored? Angry? Would he send her away in shame? The silence stretched unbearably.
Then Boaz spoke, and his voice was filled with wonder and joy. He understood. She had chosen him, not for his wealth, not out of desperation. Ruth's eyes filled with tears of relief and joy. Before anyone could see and misunderstand, he helped Ruth prepare to leave. "Wait," he said, and he filled her shawl with 6 measures of barley, an enormous amount, a statement of his commitment and provision. "Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed," he said with a smile. As the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky, she slipped away from the threshing floor. At daybreak, Boaz went to the town gate and gathered 10 elders as witnesses. When the closer kinsman passed by, Boaz called him to sit and presented the matter. Naomi was selling the land that belonged to Elimelech, and the man had the first right to redeem it. The man agreed, until Boaz added that redeeming the land also meant marrying Ruth the Moabite to preserve the family line. Realizing it would affect his inheritance, the man refused and transferred his right to Boaz by giving him his sandal. Boaz then declared before the elders that he would redeem the land and take Ruth as his wife. The people rejoiced and blessed them, praying that Ruth would be like the great mothers of Israel, and that their family would be honored in Bethlehem. Then there was a wedding. Bethlehem celebrated with music, food, and joy. Boaz and Ruth stood together under the canopy, their hands joined and their eyes fixed on each other. Ruth, once a foreign widow, now stood as a joyful bride. Boaz looked at her with deep love and pride, and everyone could see this was not just duty. This was love. Months passed, and Ruth's belly grew with new life. Boaz rested his hand gently where their child grew, and they laughed with wonder as the baby moved. Naomi watched with tears of joy. Life was coming from what had once seemed like death. Everything that had been lost was being restored. God had not forgotten them. Even in the darkness, He had been working all along. And now the fruit of that redemption was growing beneath Ruth's heart. And then the day came. Ruth labored and brought forth a son. Boaz whispered, "We have a son." The baby himself represented the future, not just their future, but the future of all Israel. For this baby boy, named Obed, would be the grandfather of the greatest king Israel would ever know. Then Ruth placed baby Obed in Naomi's waiting arms. And Naomi, who had been so bitter, who had said, "Call me Mara," who had claimed God had brought her back empty,
Naomi held her grandson and was transformed utterly. She looked up at heaven with praise. The Lord has not left me without a redeemer.
The women of Bethlehem gathered around Naomi, celebrating with her, blessing her, and then they spoke words that would be remembered forever. Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer.
A family, blessed and whole and full of hope. Young Obed grew up loved and secure, playing in the courtyard and learning to be a shepherd like his ancestors. Ruth watched him with joy. Boaz taught him with patience, and Naomi blessed him with stories. He knew nothing of the famine and sorrow that had come before him, only love and peace. And as he grew strong, he would one day become the father of Jesse, the grandfather of King David, and part of the family line that would lead to Jesus. Two hands clasped together, one young, one old, both refusing to let go. This is the heart of Ruth's story, covenant love. The kind of love that says, I will not leave you. The love that chooses loyalty over comfort and commitment over convenience. And as long as this book exists, Ruth's story will speak hope to every generation. The sun rises over Bethlehem, just as it has for thousands of years. Light overcomes the darkness once again. This is God's promise. His mercies are new every morning. His faithfulness never fails. This is the story of Ruth, and the story of the God who redeems. And his story never ends.